Welcome back to the NIL Era podcast. My name is Elise Byun.
And I'm Fernando Andrade. Since our last semi-recap recording in episode 11, a lot has changed in just a very short amount of time. And today we are going to discuss some of those things and the connotations behind them. I think this is precisely why we started the podcast. There's so much going on. It's an ever-changing space, and we're just trying to understand it ourselves to communicate this to you guys. So as of right now, we've already done 2 episodes on the House settlement, and that is episode 3 and episode 7 with Grant House himself. But like we've said before, things are changing almost every single day. Elise, again, I'm coming to you. Help us out here. Since we've last discussed the House settlement, whether the topic itself and with the man himself, what has happened?
So since we've last really done a deep dive into the House settlement, and even, like you said, that episode with Grant, there has been a lot of new information. Like Grant said in the episode with us, the settlement is technically not fully approved yet. We really just got a sneak peek of the proposal. So from the preliminary terms that we have discussed, which encompasses a lot of different things, there was a preliminary hearing held on September 5th with Judge Claudia Wilkins. So as we record this current episode, it's been about a week and a half since that hearing. And by the time this episode gets released, it will be 3 days before another preliminary hearing. So this is just far from over in terms of the conversations around the proposal and the terms.
All right, so as of right now, we are recording on Tuesday, September 17th. This will be out before the next preliminary hearing. Great timing for people listening. Help us get caught up, though. The first hearing was on the 5th of September. I believe actually, well, at least where I am, close in the Bay Area in Oakland. So help me out for anybody trying to catch up, getting ready for the next one. What happened on the 5th of September?
I think for myself, from watching the preliminary hearing and just digesting so much that was being discussed, but the biggest and maybe one of the most significant discussions was around the restrictions on collectives. And we have a collectives episode here for the NIL Era podcast, so make sure you also listen to that. Just get a kind of overview of what collectives are and kind of the pros and cons of that. But in terms of the settlement, the judge has an issue with the settlement's attempt to limit NIL collective deals by subjecting them to increased scrutiny and approval by a new regulatory entity. So basically, the settlement gives a third party chosen by the NCAA the ability to block any NIL deal over $600 that sees as above, quote, fair market value or pay for play. And as of now, and how it's written in the settlement, the NCAA and conferences have the right to not let you participate in that deal. So the NCAA and conferences want this provision in the settlement to try and limit deals they consider pay for play or not true NIL, which we've talked about. But as the judge noted, the settlement itself is going to allow pay for play with revenue share. And she says verbatim, quote, "People don't like it when you try and take things away from them," which in this case is the NIL collective deals.
Very interesting. There's clearly so much going on here. I really think, you explained it extremely well, but I think we even need to pause and unpack even more. So what is the judge really trying to say here about pay for play? Because, in the NIL era, name, image, and likeness, I like to remind people, for those new listening, there are 2 aspects to NIL. The name, image, and likeness, which tends to be on the influencer side of things. But then there's pay for play and that loophole that exists with collectives, which are these boosters, donors, mega alumni fans that are just donating and creating some sort of pay for play loophole. So specifically on that side, Elise, what's going on?
From my point of view, the judge was making a point that there's no way to legally distinguish collectives and legitimate third-party NIL. She's saying if these third parties of, let's say, Nike, Celsius, things like that, if these companies don't have restrictions, legally, collectives shouldn't either. And when we record this on September 17th, Tennessee actually just announced that they are going to be preparing to add a, quote, talent fee to ticket prices to raise money to give to players that will roll out in fall 2025. This is interesting and this is important to note because this talent fee is 10% to be added to the tickets. So a talent fee, you just can't tell me that that isn't pay for play. Like, that is directly showing that we are in a pay for play era and we will continue to grow into or argue that we're already in this pay for play era of college athletics.
I mean, what that sounds like to me is ticket revenue sharing. Quite literally ticket revenue sharing. So it'll be interesting. I think there's plenty to talk about here. Before I give my own thoughts, could you share a bit of yours on this ticket revenue system from Tennessee that was announced day of recording? I believe it was this morning from Tennessee.
I think it's interesting because the dialogue around this, and I think people and fans would get upset about it because Tennessee and athletic department, we've talked about it before, they make so much money. Like, why are you charging your fans a 10% on their tickets extra to support your student athletes? But then again, it's also just a different way for them to make revenue. And I think what we're experiencing right now is donor fatigue. Donors are tired of donating both to the collective and the athletic department. We've had the conversation of collectives kind of battling with athletic departments because now donors, alumni, boosters are donating straight to collectives to put money into student athletes' pockets. So it's kind of it's going around the athletic department, student athlete development program, fundraising programs that are important to a success of an athletic department. So I think this 10% added is 100% like pay for play in terms of what that looks like. But it's also like, I think fans, if they're doing this 10%, they're going to, like, I saw a comment when I was reading this, and it was like, do I get my 10% back if they play badly? And even the Auburn-Cal game, a lot of people are betting on, obviously, college sports in general. That Auburn-Cal game, all of College Game Day picked Auburn to win, and Cal had a kind of an upset win, I guess. People were Venmo requesting the Auburn QB for their bets back. Like, I think we're just in a different time right now, and even that Auburn Cal example, it's kind of insinuating that pay for play is happening, and I believe pay for play, we're in it, but that's kind of a different discussion. But I think this 10% is an interesting way that Tennessee went about it.
I mean, from what you're saying though, those are ridiculously bad arguments. Like, the fact that you're betting and the fact that the person played a certain way are completely different things. If they were the same, that would be totally illegal. Like, on all grounds, that would be very, very, very illegal. We've seen that historically. People get suspended for life from it. Like there's no reason to be like, well, I get, no, you're not paying for a ticket to watch the team you're supporting win. Obviously, everybody wants to see them win. I think the ridiculous thing about the 10% is two things. Those arguments, personally, I think are ridiculously bad. You're paying to watch them perform. You're not paying to watch them win. That's not how entertainment works. You want to go to be entertained. If you're going to cry after a loss, boo-hoo, that's on you. You can't go expecting your team to win. But what I think is ridiculous is adding 10%. Why not just give them the 10% that's already there on the ticket? Like, why do you feel the need to add? Do you lack the money? Does Tennessee athletics really lack the money? I could understand other schools having to increase prices. Fair enough. But Tennessee, are you serious? Also, I don't know how much they charge, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. I think this is very tricky, specifically because, again, this was announced a few hours ago as we're recording, so I don't want to jump ahead. But again, hypothetically, how will this revenue share scheme of tickets be divided? Will QB1 get the same as QB3? Will the walk-on get the same as a scholarship player? I think those are very interesting things to talk about because there's plenty of arguments of, yeah, the star players should be paid. What about the guy that's just a walk-on and is there and will never see the field? Is that guy also making that money? It's plenty to think about. I don't know how you feel about that.
I totally agree with the part about the added 10%. Also, if like you were gonna add it, maybe don't announce it like that. Like fans, I don't think are gonna love that aspect of it. In terms of who's getting the money, I think that's a big question, and just the settlement overall. That was something that Judge Claudia Wilkins brought up, but like we said, like the collective part was a big bulk of what was talked about. But I think that's a real concern within student athletes, within athletic departments in general, of what are the guidelines, if any, on revenue share. We talked about it a little in the recap as episode 11 of men's basketball versus football student athletes in terms of that revenue share. I don't know if guidelines would be the best way to go about it and like best practices, or if you need something solidified in a settlement, but would both and all parties agree to those guidelines. Even in the preliminary hearing, one of the lawyers had said a settlement is a compromise. I think ideally there would be guidelines, but I don't know if everyone would agree to it, so that's why it's not in there. There's things like that I think are tricky, and I would never have thought of it like that. So we'll see where this kind of ends up going.
Well, I mean, where is this all going, just to wrap up this section?
I think there's another hearing on Thursday, September 26th. So in a couple days in terms of when this episode gets released. This is where all parties are supposed to have amended some of the points made above, and it will be interesting to see if anything actually gets resolved. If not, this could go to trial where the NCAA risks bankruptcy from damages much more than $2.8 billion. And a recent development, also kind of from today, big day, is the governor of Georgia has signed an executive order that prohibits the NCAA from taking action against an institution for compensation of an athlete for NIL. So schools in the state of Georgia can directly pay NIL dollars to athletes before this revenue share era of the House settlement, which is obviously an insane competitive advantage, and this order will remain in effect until the effective date of the House settlement, whenever that gets settled or if that gets settled. This topic will be something we will definitely continue to talk about in future episodes. Like I said, it kind of just happened today, but just wanted to include this here to show the real-time change that happens in college athletics and how similar this feels to the 2020-2021 era when when states got involved before the NCAA changed its rules. So it's very much so changing every single day. And for sure, we'll do a very much so deep dive, but wanted to include this here.
So I just want to provide some context for our listeners, whoever's listening to this podcast episode, whoever's listened to previous episodes. There is a document that Elise prepares as we talk about these episodes, and it's what we base off like the entire conversation, and we text throughout the week and everything going on. A good chunk of what we're talking about literally happened a few hours ago. Like, we have a week to prepare. We chat about it via text. We're sending each other things on Instagram DMs of what's going on. And a good chunk of these heavy stories came out today. So one, that's for context in case anything happens in the next few days. If so, we'll include an additional add-on at the end. But point two is it's changing every single day. And I'll continue to make this point. It is unfair for schools in different states to be competing at the same level when the field is just completely tilted one way. Like, for the state of Georgia to be able to do this is a ridiculous competitive advantage against all the other schools out there. I'm not saying that all the other schools out there would be able to pay their student athletes the same way schools in Georgia will, because I know there are some humongous schools there. Fair enough. But as of right now, in my eyes, it's like saying, you know what? I'm going to allow the schools and student athletes in this state to have some enhancers. But all the other 49 states don't have access to those enhancers. That's a humongous issue, especially when considering transfers, especially when considering recruiting. It just gives you a humongous advantage moving forward. And I believe the only solution will be some sort of federal law for this. Because if it's a state by state law, you are going to have 50 different laws in place. And there's no way to win
Yeah.
in that way.
I think we've already seen it before. Like, even with this NIL that I mentioned in the 2020-2021 era, it's California and Gavin Newsom approved it before any other state did. So if the NCAA weren't to change its rules on NIL and California student athletes participated in NIL because it was allowed in the state of California, they would be ineligible. So I'm interesting to see what kind of happens here. Like, because we also saw it with the preliminary injunction, I'm pretty sure, for Tennessee and those transfers and the one-time transfer rule and those kind of rules there. And the NCAA had to go back and be like, okay, you can transfer as many times as you want until we figure this out. So is the NCAA going to come out and say, okay, you're allowed to revenue share until we figure this out? So we talked about it with Jim from athletes.org is the NCAA is supposed to be the governing body of college athletics. And right now they don't have a strong hold to govern college sports. It's kind of a mess, clearly. And like Fernando said, it changes every day, which I think is so interesting, and we'll continue to kind of unpack that there. But kind of a big overview of what's kind of been happening in the House settlement and just college athletics in general, because it all connects in some way.
I mean, regardless, this is fun. It is chaotic, but it is fun. It is exciting. This is why we're doing this. So let's keep it rolling. Clearly, the House settlement is far from over, so we'll keep you all posted as things progress. Another aspect that is far from over is conference realignment. We saw the Power 5 convert into the Power 4 with the end of the Pac-12, unless it may be coming back. What the hell is going on, Elise? My dear Pac-12, I thought was a rest in peace situation, and now it seems like the 3 days have passed and the Pac-12 has come back to life. What is going on? Is it the same conference? Is it a new one? Is it rebuilding? What's going on here?
I think first and foremost, it was a great day to see the Pac-12 kind of rebuild and show that resilience. Like, we've had another episode on kind of the Pac-12 and conference realignment. We both are such fans of the Pac-12. I am so glad I was able to represent the Pac-12 conference and the people behind the conference, and I will 100% till the day I die stand by that. But kind of going into this exciting news, I think the Oregon State athletic director, Scott Barnes, he said it best. He says, chaos is our friend because ultimately it can give more opportunity than what we're thinking about. So the Pac-12 is rebuilding and has shown that resilience of its conference and new leadership under the commissioner, Teresa Gold. So on September 12th, again, pretty recent, the Pac-12 officially announced the addition of Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, and Fresno State to join Oregon State and Washington State at the start of the school year in 2026. This is the beginning of a multi-phase expansion to reach 8 schools in the new Pac-12 conference, and that 8 is the number because the NCAA minimum to be required as an FBS conference is 8. So, like most conference moves, there are some exit fees, but this Pac-12 expansion isn't a super expensive one that we've seen in the past. Each Mountain West school is contractually bound to a $12 million exit fee, and the Pac-12 is on a hook for another additional $10 to $12 million penalty fee for the school they acquire as part of this scheduling agreement the conference struck with the Mountain West. But the new Pac-12 media rights deal the Pac-12 is looking to secure is probably worth more than what the current Mountain West schools and TV packages get. So for those 4 schools to join, I think it is a great move. And it's also looking at that sponsorship potential and branding that the Pac-12 has built for decades.
I mean, it's definitely chaos. It's definitely a great opportunity and very interesting choice of schools. I'm curious what you think about those schools specifically.
I think those schools are the next best schools to compete with Oregon State and Washington State in terms of a conference. These programs are great football programs that are competitive in the group of five and now can get that national exposure. I also think they were chosen because of the potential for those non conference rivalry weeks. The Colorado State football rivalry has become one of the most anticipated games, even this past weekend. It was a great thing to watch. And it's keeping those long traditions standing of even the Washington schools of something like the Apple Cup.
Well, like you previously mentioned, there are 6 schools in what's currently called the Pac-12, potentially Pac-6 for now. They need 8 schools to join to be considered an FBS program or an FBS conference, excuse me. I think there's definitely plenty to talk about. There's plenty to speculate about potentially. I think one thing I would like to include here is that Cal and Stanford stay loyal to the Pac-12 until the very end. Obviously, they left for the ACC. They were kind of forced to, but they were some of the last ones to leave. Obviously, humongous institutions, some of the most important academic institutions on the planet. So, understandably so. But at the same time, Elise, Cal and Stanford, not only the top academic schools in the world, but they are the schools that are traveling the most this football season. And we're talking over 10,000 miles each. That is not only tiring, but costly and impacting not only one team, but the entire athletic department. With that being said, I'm not sure if the Pac-12 or the new Pac-12, will be as strong as the previous Pac-12, at least strong enough to be considered what used to be the Power Five. So I see it both ways. Like, it could be the end or the beginning for Cal and Stanford athletics. Like, what are we seeing here? Am I right with this speculation?
You are right with that speculation. I think there's speculation that Cal and Stanford will come back to the West Coast and rejoin the Pac-12 because, like you said, we are two of the schools that are traveling the most. Like, we're in the top three, minus Hawaii, because Hawaii always travels. But we are the top three in terms of who's traveling the most. It's UCLA, Cal, Stanford. That's how they ranked it in terms of those travel mileages. And because our media rights with the ACC is so much less, it is hard to accommodate that increased travel with that deal. But realistically, Cal and Stanford are not going to come back to the Pac 12. I think, yes, the Pac 12 rebuilding is amazing, and I personally love it. But now they have to rebuild credibility with this new schools as a Power 5 conference and not just a glorified Group of 5 conference. I also think that Cal and Stanford's egos of being academically excellent schools will keep them to stay with those like-minded institutions in the ACC. I think from a Cal and Stanford perspective, they are as a pair. They're not separating. They will stay together. And even when we moved from the Pac-12 initially, it was hard for our two institutions to figure out what aligned with both academic and athletic goals, and that was the ACC. And I really cannot see us moving.
So, who else could it be?
I think very much so speculating. Let's acknowledge again that this is September 17th, because by the time this gets released, I have a feeling something will already have happened. So this is predictions on September 17th from my end. I think the Pac-12 should target either UNLV, Nevada, and Tulane. There are rumors of Memphis and Tulane coming from the AAC. I think 2 or 3 more schools added is the sweet spot. And those 3 schools should have enough brand awareness and strong football. I think if you go more than 3, you are cutting too much into like the division of what is to be these media rights deals. I think 2 might not be enough. I think 3 is what they should be striving for. But I think there's also a question of, do you add more schools just for basketball? Do you look at Gonzaga, St. Mary's, or like I said, Tulane, who have great men's basketball programs, to add such a more, I think, stronger argument for those media rights deals? From an article from Front Office Sports, They write about how a group of community leaders in Sacramento actually are trying to take advantage of this unprecedented opportunity provided by the news of the Pac-12's expansion. They launched an executive committee called the SAC-12, very, very funny, aimed at propelling Sacramento State from an FCS to an FBS football program through an invite from either the Pac-12 or Mountain West. To me, it's such an interesting movement and ripple effects that affects all levels of college football. We saw it when Nick Saban from Alabama retired, which triggered so many coaching movements, and conference realignment triggers so much opportunity and movement as well. So you're seeing schools leaving the Mountain West, and you're going to see the Mountain West trying to rebuild their conference. If the Pac-12 decides to poach more schools within the AAC of, let's say, like Memphis or Tulane, they're also going to have to rebuild. So there's talk of the AAC potentially getting Air Force, Navy, and all of them and putting them into a conference. And it's interesting to see how much opportunity kind of goes about. And I'm interested to see who they try and poach, obviously, but also when they do it. If you don't withdraw and give notice within 2 years of leaving, of when that media rights kind of ends, there's an additional fee of around $43 million total as like a poaching fee. So that's why I think the Pac-12, these 2 or 3 or however many more schools are going to try and expand to, I think it's going to happen quick, and I think they need to build upon this momentum that they are having.
Wow. All right, 43 million is quite hefty in comparison to that initial 12 million. So definitely will be interesting to see what happens. And again, those predictions, September 17th, who knows what will be happening by the time this comes out. With that being said, I think one of the reasons we have this podcast, Elise, is to talk about the nitty gritty, the things that others may not know or may not be thinking about, may not notice. It is fun to think about the Pac-12 coming back. It is fun to think about, elite competition on the West Coast. But we must remember why the Pac-12 kind of died for a bit in the first place, which was the media rights deals. I know these schools coming in are neither academically nor athletically as talented as the schools that formed the original Pac-12, but I'm sure if they're leaving their conferences for a new one, they still want to have a great media rights deals. So, Elise, congratulations. You are the commissioner of this new formed Pac-12. What would you do if you were in those shoes? What would you do with the media rights deals? What do you think is best moving forward?
I think this is the big test and the big question for the Pac-12. And I think the more creative, the better, especially with what has happened for the Pac-12 in the past couple of years. Why not try something different from the rest? They need to create new content opportunities for these schools. So does that mean you play on different days of the week than other college football teams? Football Saturday is the big thing. There's like 10 games going on. ESPN has double windows. Big Ten Network has double windows. There's so much happening on Saturdays. So do you do kind of like what the NFL does with Monday Night Football and that branding of it? Do you have a Tuesday night game for the Pac-12? Do you try and create a new window for all eyes to be on your conference? I think they need to move away from Pac-12 networks because of the lack of accessibility that there was, because I think that will continue to be a problem if they arrange it the same way in terms of how they did the territories. And I think they need to play on every single platform in terms of linear, cable, and streaming. They need eyes and they need numbers on these games because, like I said, are they going to be looked at as just a glorified group of 5 conference? They need to build credibility. They need to build those numbers as a Power 5 conference. And I think the commissioner of the Pac-12, Teresa Gold, I think she is going to have to get creative, and I'm excited to see what comes about of this. Do they continue to partner with CW, or do they try and get like on NBC, Peacock, things like that? I'm interested to see what happens.
Honestly, that idea that you just mentioned is one of the best ideas I've ever heard in terms of the business move, right? There's NFL Sunday. The NFL owns Sundays in the United States. End of discussion. College football owns Saturdays. End of discussion. There's Monday night, there's Thursday night. Friday night lights, traditionally for high school. But if you're trying to gain momentum, filling that Tuesday, Wednesday gap, and I don't know, 5 p.m. Pacific kickoff, 8 p.m. Eastern, who's not going to watch it? Like, I don't care who's playing. People are going to want to watch. And if you have 7 days a week of football, America will be happy. That's just a business move. With that being said, that's the situation of the NIL era. It's a fantastic business move. But what does that mean for travel? What does that mean for school? What does that mean for academics of student athletes? Will you still be a student athlete? Or are we just heading over to the pro athlete side, the athlete before student model, which, again, we're already in, if not about to be fully in. But business-wise, it makes all the sense in the world to do Tuesday and Wednesday. Honestly, Pac-12, if you're hearing this, please, I would love to see this. But what does that mean for the student athletes? How much school will they be missing? Can they make up for it? Will football have, a special sort of consideration and have an extra class on Saturday or Sunday to catch up? Like, how is that going to work? Especially with those schools in different regions in the travel. So plenty of speculation there. I think it's a fascinating business idea. I'm not sure about the student side and academic side.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I don't think that's like a groundbreaking idea because clearly the NFL does it. Like you said, they branded that Monday Night Football. Like that is their night. And even this year with the Big Ten and that expansion of conferences, like now there's a Fox Sports Friday Night Football window. So a couple schools had to be pulled into that Friday night, and it screws up your like travel plans in general, first of all, because everyone knows it's Saturday football, so everyone schedules their hotels like Friday and maybe Saturday. Probably not, they fly out, but it like screws things up. So I don't think like, let's say a Tuesday night college football game is like, I don't think they've never heard of it. I doubt it, but I think we are in a different time, day and age. We are in a time where money rules all, and kind of always has, but I think it's very much so out in the open now. And it's does the Pac-12 just fully just dive right into it and let's rebrand, let's do something different? Do we kind of jeopardize the student before athlete? But again, different time. Are we even student athletes or is it athlete student? I am very interested to see what they do, or if this is even a possibility that they're thinking of.
I mean, who knows? We go into revenue sharing. Teams will be financially in a weird position, or athletic departments. Flights are cheaper midweek. Hotels are cheaper midweek. It creates a midweek event for students to be excited for fans to be excited for on a Tuesday. You know what? Forget Taco Tuesday and Margarita Tuesday and Tequila Tuesday. You're going to the football game. I think, you know what? I mean, rebrand it. Taco Tuesday at the football game. I think this is fascinating. This is the poll of the week on Spotify. Go click on it. What do you guys think about Tuesday football games, Wednesday football games? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment either on Spotify or YouTube, and the poll is on Spotify. And honestly, we're going to clip this and put it on LinkedIn, tag the Pac-12, and I'd love to get anybody's thoughts, comments there on the LinkedIn post because it's a fascinating idea. I think there's a lot to consider there, a lot of food for thought. So we'll see what people think here in the comment section. But for now, to continue with college football and wrap up this episode, I mean, as this episode's getting released, it would have been week 4 of college football and entering week 5. So again, apologies. This past weekend, we have no idea what will happen by the time you guys are listening to this. But Elise, up until right now, what's going on in the college football space? What are some observations you've had?
It's funny because in episode 11, we talked about that underdog and non-conference games. And I think I even said, like, not saying they're boring, but yeah, I really, I was wrong. I was very wrong because that following week, we had that huge NIU at Notre Dame upset where an unranked NIU beat 5th ranked Notre Dame at home. That was a great game. Notre Dame had paid NIU $1.4 million to play them. And then week 3, we had week 3 we had Memphis at FSU, where Memphis won while being paid $1.3 million to play. UNLV beat Kansas with a payout of $700,000 for non-conference play. So the underdog has really made non-conference play super interesting, and I'm really excited to see how this plays out for the expanded CFP, that playoff at the end of the year. And just as we see more and more eyes on these upset games, and now maybe non-Power 5 football programs, these great athletes are getting more and more eyes on them. Thus, they're going to be more susceptible to potentially look into transferring or being poached, which is not allowed, but it happens, being poached to transfer. And the Idaho football coach gave great advice, to which he says, wait until the grass gets greener. And I was interested by that statement, and then saw a video following up on that by Max Brown, who was the starting QB at USC and Pitt. He made a video on this, and it was just great explaining what that means. Wait until the grass gets greener. Means stay and play at your current school, get better. So when you transfer, you can get maybe 500,000 instead of 100,000. These starters at an FCS school or non-Power 5 FBS transfer, they may not get the starting job at this new school. So stay at your current school, get better, and go to possibly an even better school. I think it's a great pitch and such an interesting way to look at your options. I also think it gives a glimpse of how rapid and how it's a given that rosters will change year to year with the portal. It's now not if someone transfers, but when. And I think that is such an eye-opening thing to what we're currently experiencing in college athletics.
I think that's a very, very good sales pitch from the Idaho coach, because if you're a smaller program, the appeal would be, you know what, you could get minutes here, you'll get more opportunities, come here, get me some results, and then we'll help you transfer. It's acknowledging the place and the role that you play as a football program in the nation. And if you view it as a developing step to then go to an FBS school from an FSC school or FCS school, or even just from an unranked to a ranked team, I think viewing it as a development stage is great. Now, with that being said, let's remember that every student athlete, specifically in football, comes from different financial situations. So some players are going to say, you know what, screw that. I can't wait for 500K. I need the 100K right now. So again, I mean, it's not that simple. It sounds pretty. It sounds nice. It sounds ideal. But I don't think that's a reality for plenty of student athletes. And forget about the financial situation. If you're a 19-year-old and somebody tells you, I'll give you 6 figures right now, it's quite difficult to say, you know what, hey, wait, and then you'll 5X it in a few years. Yeah, coach, but you're not considering that football is a very much so a contact sport, and I could get injured. I don't know what's going to happen. I need that 100K right now. So interesting argument. We'll see what people make of it, but I think it's fantastic for programs to realize, hey, you know what, there's bigger teams out there, better opportunities for star players. We could be a developing stage for you. I think that's fantastic. And a great way to wrap up this episode. Fantastic stuff here today. For anybody that watched on YouTube or listened on Spotify, thank you guys so much. If you're on YouTube, as always, please like and subscribe. If you're on Spotify, please follow the podcast. Don't forget to answer the poll of the week on Spotify and leave a comment on YouTube or Spotify there as well. But for now, that is it for today, and we will see you all next Monday for episode 14.
Bye.